Seoul is a city that never sleeps, but it knows how to keep a secret. At 2 a.m. inside a darkened art gallery in Gangnam, Mina isn't looking at the paintings. Her hands are trembling as she signs a transfer for $2 million, the fourth donation this month. To the world, she is the elegant wife of Kang-jun, the man whose name is whispered in fear across the docks of Incheon. But in this moment, she is just a thief. She thinks she is saving Jaewon, the boy she left behind in the rain years ago. She thinks she is using her husband's blood money to wash away her own guilt. But as the transaction complete notification flashes on her burner phone, the temperature in the gallery drops. A heavy, rhythmic footstep echoes against the marble floor, the unmistakable sound of Kang-jun's handmade Italian loafers. He doesn't step into the light. He stays in the shadows, his presence a cold weight against her spine. $1 million for a memory, Mina. His voice vibrates through the dark, low and lethal. I hope he's worth the debt I'm about to collect. The trap isn't closing, it was never open. Mina is about to learn that in the Betrayal syndicate, loyalty isn't a choice, it's the only currency that keeps you alive. Before we descend into the shadows of the Betrayal syndicate, make sure to subscribe and hit the bell icon. You don't want to miss a single chapter of this ultimate blood debt. The penthouse was too quiet. It was the kind of silence that felt expensive but heavy, like the thick silk drapes that blocked out the glowing chaos of Seoul. Mina stood by the window, her fingers tracing the cold glass. She wore a dress the color of pearls, looking every bit like the queen of the Betrayal syndicate, but inside she felt like a thief gasping for air. In her pocket, a burner phone vibrated. It was a short, sharp pulse, a signal from Jaewon. Her first love, the man she had left behind in the rain years ago when her family practically sold her to the ghost of Seoul to pay their debts. She had already siphoned $5 million of her husband's money into Jaewon's accounts over the last few months. She told herself it was a loan. She told herself it was the only way to wash away the guilt of leaving him. You're standing in the dark again, a voice rumbled from the shadows. Mina didn't jump. She had lived with Kang-jun long enough to know he moved like a predator, silent, certain, and always watching. He was sitting at his workbench in the corner, his face lit only by a small lamp as he worked on a cracked 15th-century vase. Kang-jun was a restorer of ancient porcelain. He believed that with enough gold and enough patience, any broken thing could be made beautiful again. He stood up and walked toward her. He didn't look like a mob boss in the soft light, he looked like a scholar. But when he reached out to touch her cheek, his hand was as cold as the marble floors. He looked at her the way he looked at his vases, searching for a crack, a flaw, a sign that his most prized possession was about to shatter. Seoul is a city of liars, Mina, he whispered, his eyes locking onto hers. Everyone thinks they can hide in the dark. They think if they move slowly enough, I won't notice what they've taken. Mina's heart hammered against her ribs, but she kept her face as still as stone. I don't know what you mean, Kang-jun. He leaned in closer, his breath ghosting over her ear. He didn't yell, he didn't even sound angry, he sounded disappointed. I noticed a small fracture in our accounts today, a tiny chip in the foundation. Most people would miss it, but I've always had an eye for detail. He ran a thumb over her lower lip, his gaze dropping to her pocket where the burner phone sat heavy and cold. Be careful, Mina, porcelain is beautiful, but once it breaks, the edges become sharp enough to draw blood. He patted her cheek once, a gesture that felt more like a threat than a caress, and walked back to his workbench. He didn't say another word, but the message was clear. The ghost was no longer just fixing vases, he was watching the cracks in his own home. Mina looked back at the window, her reflection trembling. She had wanted to save Jaewon, but she realized she had just invited the shadow of her husband to follow her into the past. Mina is terrified that her husband knows her secret, but she's about to discover that Jaewon is hiding something even more dangerous. Why did the burner phone just receive a message from an unknown number saying, "He's not who you think he is"? The mystery is only beginning. The morning sun over Seoul was pale and cold, offering no warmth to the glass and steel towers of Gangnam. Mina stood in the kitchen, her hands shaking as she poured tea into a delicate ceramic cup. Kang-jun had already left for the docks, but his presence lingered in the air like the scent of old wood and danger. Every time she closed her eyes, she heard his voice. Porcelain is beautiful, but once it breaks, the edges become sharp enough to draw blood. She pulled the burner phone from her robe. The message from the unknown number sat there, staring back at her. He's not who you think he is. Her mind raced. Was it a trick? Was Kang-jun testing her, or was there someone else watching her moves? She had to know. She had to see Jaewon. Mina, dressed in a simple black coat and a wide-brimmed hat, slipping out of the penthouse through the service elevator. She took a series of taxis, switching 3 times to ensure no one followed her, finally stopping at a derelict park on the edge of the city. This was the place where they used to meet when they were teenagers, before the Betrayal syndicate became her reality. Jaewon was already there, sitting on a rusted bench. When he looked up, Mina felt a pang of sharp, bitter grief. He wasn't the glowing, hopeful boy she remembered. His face was gaunt, his jacket was frayed, and there was a nervous twitch in his left eye. "You came," he breathed, reaching out for her hand. Mina pulled back instinctively. "The money, Jaewon, $5 million, it was supposed to clear your debts, it was supposed to make you safe. Why am I getting messages saying you aren't who I think you are?" Jaewon's face paled, his eyes darting around the empty park. "I don't know what you're talking about, Mina. The people I owe, they are monsters, they want more, they know who your husband is, they think I'm an ATM because of you." "I can't give you any more," she whispered, her voice cracking. "Kang-jun knows, he noticed the chip in the accounts. If I move another dollar, he won't just kill me, he'll find you." Jaewon stood up, his hand gripping her arm with a strength that surprised her. It wasn't the touch of a man in love, it was the grip of a man drowning. "You have to help me one last time, just one more transfer. If you don't, they'll send my fingers to your front door." As he spoke, Mina noticed something. Tucked beneath his sleeve was a glimpse of a tattoo, a small, coiled serpent. Her heart froze. That wasn't a mark of a common gambler. It was the mark of the Ashima clan, the mortal enemies of the Betrayal syndicate. She realized then that Jaewon wasn't just a victim, he was a weapon. Mina just realized she's been funding her husband's greatest rivals, but the real shock is yet to come. As she turns to leave the park, she sees a familiar black sedan idling at the gate. Why is Kang-jun's personal driver waiting for her, and what is inside the envelope he's holding? The trap is about to snap shut. If you were caught meeting your ex by your mafia husband's driver, would you play it cool or start running? Drop a fire if you think she's about to get caught. The car ride back to the penthouse was silent, save for the hum of the engine and the drumming of rain against the reinforced glass. The driver, a man who had served Kang-jun for a decade, didn't say a word. He simply handed Mina a heavy, cream-colored envelope before pulling away from the park. Inside the penthouse, Mina tore the envelope open. Her breath hitched. It wasn't a threat. It was a bank statement from 3 years ago, the very first month of her marriage. Highlighted in red was a transfer of $1 million. It was the first gift she had ever sent Jaewon. She had thought she was being so careful back then, using a series of shell companies she'd built from her father's old business records. But seeing it now, printed on her husband's stationery, she realized the truth. Kang-jun hadn't just discovered her theft yesterday. He had been watching her siphon his empire for years. He had let her do it. The realization was more terrifying than a physical blow. Why would a man like the Ghost allow his wife to fund his enemies? Was she the bait, or was he simply waiting for the debt to become large enough that her life would be the only way to pay it back? Her burner phone buzzed again. It was Jaewon. "I'm sorry for being rough, I'm scared. Meet me at the docks, warehouse 12 at midnight. I have the proof you need to get away from him forever." Mina looked at the bank statement, then at the phone. She felt like a piece of porcelain being squeezed between 2 giant hands. She thought of her husband's hobby, how he loved to find broken things and make them whole again. Was he doing that to her? Was he breaking her down just so he could be the one to put her back together? She knew warehouse 12. It was Biko territory, but the Ashima clan had been trying to move in for months. If she went there, she was walking into a war zone, but if she didn't, she would never know if Jaewon was truly the boy she loved or the monster she feared. As the sun began to set over Seoul, painting the sky the color of a fresh bruise, Mina made her choice. She walked to Kang-jun's private safe in the study. She knew the code, he had never changed it. Inside sat a small, velvet-lined box containing a 14th-century celadon bowl. It was the most valuable piece in his collection. She wrapped it in her silk scarf and tucked it into her bag. If Jaewon needed a final payment, she would give him the one thing her husband valued more than anything else. Mina is heading to the docks with a priceless artifact, but she doesn't know she's being followed by more than just her husband's men. Why did she find a single black serpent scale tucked inside the cream envelope, and what did Kang-jun mean when he told his lead enforcer, "Let her see the end of the dream"? The shadows are closing in. The docks of Incheon were a graveyard of rusted shipping containers and oily seawater that reflected the jagged neon of the city. Minna parked her car 3 blocks away, her breath coming in shallow hitches. The humidity of the rain made her silk dress cling to her skin like a second cold layer of scales. In her hands, the 14th century celadon bowl felt impossibly heavy. It was more than an artifact, it was the physical proof of her betrayal. She walked toward Warehouse 12, her heels clicking against the wet asphalt. Every shadow seemed to stretch toward her, every creak of a crane sounding like a sniper's bolt locking into place. She reached the side door of the warehouse and slipped inside. The air was thick with the smell of diesel and old salt. "Jaewon," she whispered, her voice swallowed by the vast hollow space. "Over here, Minna." She turned to see Jaewon standing near a stack of wooden crates. The nervous boy she had met in the park was gone. In his place stood someone harder, his eyes glittering with a desperate, feverish light. He wasn't alone. 3 men stood behind him, their faces obscured by the brims of their caps. One of them shifted and the light caught the coiled serpent tattoo on his hand, the Ashima clan. "I brought what you asked for," Minna said, her voice trembling as she held out the silk-wrapped bowl. "Now give me the proof, give me the files that will stop Kang-jun from finding us." Jaewon let out a dry, jagged laugh that set her teeth on edge. "Proof? Minna, there are no files. Kang-jun doesn't leave a paper trail, he leaves bodies." He stepped closer, reaching out to snatch the bag from her hands. "You were never buying our freedom, you were buying me more time with the Ashima." Minna staggered back, her heart shattering faster than any porcelain. "What are you talking about? I siphoned millions for you, I risked my life." "And they thank you for it?" Jaewon sneered, gesturing to the men behind him. "The Biko syndicate is built on Kang-jun's obsession with perfection. By draining his accounts, you didn't just help me, you weakened his borders, you made the ghost vulnerable. And now this bowl, this is the final insult. This is his heart and I'm going to break it in front of him." Suddenly, the massive industrial lights of the warehouse flickered to life, blinding them all. The heavy rolling doors at the far end began to groan open, revealing a line of black luxury SUVs idling in the rain. A single figure stepped out of the lead vehicle. Kang-jun. He didn't have a weapon in his hand, he didn't have a team of gunmen charging forward. He simply walked toward them with the calm, terrifying grace of a man who already knew how the story ended. He stopped 10 feet away, his black suit absorbing the harsh light. "You've always had a delicate touch, Minna," Kang-jun said, his voice echoing through the rafters. "But you forgot one thing about porcelain, it's strongest when it's fired in the highest heat. Did you think I wouldn't let you reach your breaking point?" Jaewon grabbed Minna, pulling her in front of him as a shield, a jagged shard of glass from a broken bottle pressed against her throat. "Stay back, ghost. I have the money, I have the girl, and I have the bowl. The Ashima are coming for your head." Kang-jun didn't even look at the glass at his wife's neck, he looked at Minna's eyes. "The debt has reached its limit. Minna, now tell me, who is going to pay it?" Minna is being held at glass point by her first love while her husband watches with a cold, terrifying smile. Why did Kang-jun just pull a small gold remote from his pocket, and what is the third guest currently hiding in the rafters above them? The ultimate blood debt is finally calling for a name. The warehouse felt like a tomb, cold and smelling of iron. Minna could feel the jagged edge of the glass bottle pressed against her throat, the heat of Jaewon's panicked breath on her ear. Across the concrete floor, Kang-jun stood perfectly still. He looked like he was admiring a painting rather than staring down a hostage situation. "Let her go, Jaewon," Kang-jun said, his voice as smooth as polished stone. "You've played your part. The Ashima used you to find the cracks in my house and you were happy to crawl inside them, but the game is over." "It's not over," Jaewon screamed, his grip tightening. "I have her, I have the bowl, this is worth more than your life." He held the 14th century celadon bowl out precariously with one hand. Minna looked at the artifact, the piece of history she had stolen to save a ghost. She realized then that Jaewon wasn't holding it because he valued its beauty. He was holding it because he knew it was the only thing Kang-jun had ever seemed to love more than power. "Do you know why I restore porcelain, Jaewon?" Kang-jun asked, taking a slow step forward. He didn't look at the glass at Minna's neck, he looked at the bowl. "Because when something is broken you can see its true composition. You can see if the clay was pure or if it was filled with sand. My wife, she thought she was saving a pure soul. but I saw the sand in you the moment you stepped back into her life. Jaewon let out a hysterical laugh. You're late, ghost. The Ashima are already in your accounts. The 5 million she gave me, it bought their loyalty. They're coming for your docks, your ships, and your head. The 5 million? Kang-jun tilted his head, a small, dark smile touching his lips. Mina didn't steal that money from me, Jaewon. I put it in an account I knew she would find. It wasn't my money. It was the Ashima clan's own laundered funds from the Incheon port. You've been paying your new masters with their own stolen cash for months. The color drained from Jaewon's face. The three men behind him suddenly shifted, their expressions turning lethal. They weren't here to protect Jaewon. They were here to execute the man who had been unknowingly handing them their own stolen money. Mina felt the glass move away from her throat as Jaewon's hand began to shake. In that split second of realization, she saw the world for what it truly was, a series of traps within traps. Her husband hadn't been a victim of her theft, he had been the architect of her rebellion. Kang-jun reached into his pocket and pulled out a small gold remote. I told you, Mina, porcelain is at its strongest when it's fired in the highest heat. Today, we see what you're made of. The table has turned, and Mina's first love is now a dead man walking, caught between a vengeful husband and an angry mob. But as the warehouse lights start to flicker, Mina realizes the remote in Kang-jun's hand isn't for the lights, it's for the crates behind her. If you were Mina, standing between the man who lied to you and the man who manipulated you, who would you run to? Would you stay and fight or let them both burn? Drop your choice in the comments, because the first explosion is only seconds away. The heavy iron doors of Warehouse 12 groaned as they began to slide shut, locking the heat of the rain outside and sealing the cold tension inside. The industrial lights flickered once, twice, before stabilizing into a harsh, clinical white. Mina stood frozen, her heart drumming a frantic rhythm against her ribs. She was no longer just a wife, she was the centerpiece of a lethal negotiation. Kang-jun stepped forward, his leather shoes clicking rhythmically on the oil-stained concrete. He looked at the three Ashima men standing behind Jaewon. I invited you here for a reason, he said, his voice carrying easily through the cavernous space. But it wasn't to watch you threaten my wife with a broken bottle. That's amateur, that's messy. Jaewon's hand shook so violently that the glass nicked Mina's skin. A tiny bead of blood bloomed against her white collar. Kang-jun's eyes narrowed, the temperature in the room seeming to drop another 10 degrees. You think the Ashima clan will protect you? Kang-jun asked, his gaze shifting to the lead gunman. Ask them what happens to a man who steals from his own masters, because as I mentioned, that 5 million Mina stole, it came from the Ashima's hidden accounts at the port. My wife didn't rob me, Jaewon. She made you a thief in the eyes of the very people you're trying to serve. The lead Ashima soldier looked at the burner phone in Jaewon's hand, then back at Kang-jun. The silence that followed was terrifying. They realized they hadn't been winning a war, they had been tricked into a civil execution. Kang-jun stopped 5 feet away. He reached out his hand not for a weapon but for the celadon bowl that Jaewon was still clutching like a lifeline. Give me the piece, Jaewon. It's the only thing in this room that has any real value left. No, Jaewon screamed, his eyes darting wildly. If I give it to you, you'll kill me. If I keep it, I have a chance. You had a chance years ago, Mina whispered, her voice finally finding its strength. She looked at the man she had loved, the boy who had promised her sunrises, and saw only a hollow shell filled with greed. You weren't worth the debt, Jaewon. You weren't even worth the lie. Kang-jun pressed the gold remote in his hand. Suddenly, the crates behind Jaewon hissed. A thick white vapor began to pour out, not fire but pressurized nitrogen. It created a wall of mist that obscured the exit, trapping Jaewon in a small, freezing circle of light. Mina, Kang-jun said, his voice low and intimate as if they were back in their penthouse. Walk to me, let the past stay in the cold. Mina is inches away from freedom, but Jaewon is about to do something desperate that will change her life forever. He's raising the 14th century bowl over his head, ready to shatter it and her husband's heart into 1,000 pieces. The clock is ticking and the ultimate blood debt is about to be paid in full. The warehouse air turned freezing as the nitrogen mist swirled around Mina's feet. In front of her, Jaewon looked like a cornered animal, his eyes wide and bloodshot. He raised the 14th century celadon bowl high above his head, his knuckles white. The artifact, worth more than most people earned in a lifetime, was now a weapon of spite. If I'm going down, I'm taking your heart with me, Jaewon shrieked. Kang-jun didn't move, he didn't even flinch. He stood like a statue carved from shadows, his gaze fixed not on the bowl but on Minna. He was waiting. This wasn't just a standoff, it was the final test of her loyalty. He had provided the stage, the villain, and the cost. Now he wanted to see if his wife was truly a partner or just another beautiful piece of porcelain in his collection. "Don't do it, Jaewon," Minna said, her voice steady despite the chaos. She stepped away from the glass shard, her eyes locking onto the boy she once loved. "You think you're breaking his heart, you're just proving you never knew him. Kang-jun doesn't love things he can't fix, and once you break that bowl you become something he will never fix." Jaewon roared and brought his arms down with all his strength. Time seemed to slow. Minna didn't dive for the bowl, she didn't try to save the clay and the glaze. Instead, she stepped forward and snatched the gold remote from Kang-jun's hand. Before the bowl could hit the concrete, she pressed the secondary trigger. A loud, metallic clack echoed through the warehouse. The crane directly above Jaewon dropped a heavy industrial magnet intended for moving shipping containers. It didn't hit him, but the sudden shift in the air and the roar of the machinery caused him to stumble. The Celadon bowl slipped from his hands, falling toward the hard floor. Minna reached out, her fingers brushing the silk scarf still wrapped around the base. She didn't catch it, but she slowed the fall just enough that it hit the mist-covered concrete with a dull thud rather than a shatter. The Ashima men moved, but they were too late. Kang-jun's snipers, hidden in the rafters, fired 3 synchronized shots, not to kill but to disarm. The guns flew from the Ashima soldiers' hands as they scrambled back into the darkness. Jaewon fell to his knees, staring at the bowl. It was chipped. A jagged piece of the rim had snapped off, lying on the floor like a broken tooth. Kang-jun walked over, his face unreadable. He looked down at the chip, then at Minna. He reached out, taking the remote back from her. "The debt is calculated, Minna," he whispered. "The money is gone, the bowl is scarred, and your past is lying in the dirt." He pulled a small, silver handgun from his waistband and pressed it into Minna's palm. The metal was cold, smelling of oil and finality. He pointed toward Jaewon, who was sobbing into his hands. "He stole 5 million from our house, he threatened the life of my wife, he broke a masterpiece," Kang-jun said, his voice dropping to a lethal hum. "In our world we don't call the police, we settle the account, pay the debt, Minna, and we walk home together." Minna is holding the gun and the man who betrayed her is begging for his life at her feet. Her husband is watching, waiting to see if she has the Biko blood in her veins. "What would you do? Would you pull the trigger to prove your loyalty to a man who manipulated you, or would you throw the gun away and walk out alone? The final choice is here and the ending will leave you breathless." The weight of the silver handgun felt like an anchor in Minna's hand, pulling her down into the cold reality of the Biko syndicate. The smell of gunpowder and nitrogen filled her lungs. At her feet, Jaewon was a broken man, his forehead pressed against the damp concrete, sobbing incoherent apologies. He was no longer the boy from the rain, he was a liability that had been closed out. Kang-jun stood behind her, his presence a silent shadow. He didn't pressure her, he didn't speak, he simply waited for her to become the woman he knew she was. Minna looked at the gun, then at the chipped Celadon bowl lying in the mist. She realized then that her guilt had been her greatest weakness. She had spent years trying to pay a debt to a past that didn't exist, while her husband had been building a future that was very real. Kang-jun hadn't manipulated her to hurt her, he had burned away her illusions to save her. She raised the gun, the barrel was steady. Jaewon looked up, his eyes wide with a final, desperate hope that her old love would save him. "You said I wasn't worth the lie," Jaewon choked out. "Minna, please, for the sake of who we were." "Who we were died the moment you took the Ashima's mark," Minna said, her voice devoid of heat. "You didn't want my help, Jaewon, you wanted my husband's throne, and you used my heart to try and take it." She didn't pull the trigger. Instead, she turned and handed the weapon back to Kang-jun, handle first. "The debt is settled, Kang-jun," she said, her voice clear and echoing. "But I won't kill a ghost, he's already dead. Let the Ashima finish what they started with him, he's their thief now, not mine." Kang-jun took the gun, a rare look of genuine approval crossing his face. He tucked the weapon back into his waistband and reached down, picking up the chipped bowl. He ran a thumb over the jagged edge where the porcelain had snapped. "A fracture can be filled with gold, Minna," he said softly. "It makes the piece stronger, more valuable, because it survived the break." He held out his hand to her. Minna looked at it, the hand of a monster, the hand of a protector, the hand of her husband. She took it. As they walked toward the idling black SUVs, leaving the sobbing Jaewon to the shadows of the warehouse and the approaching Ashima enforcers, Minna felt the last of her foolishness wash away in the rain. She wasn't the wife who had siphoned millions, she was the woman who had survived the ghost. As the car door closed, shielding them from the world, Kang-jun looked at her in the dim light of the interior. Tomorrow, we start the restoration, not just of the bowl, Minna, of everything. Minna leaned back against the leather seat, watching the docks fade into the distance. She was no longer a prisoner in a golden cage. She was the cold queen, and the city was finally hers to see. Minna chose her husband and her power over the lies of her past, but the Ashima clan isn't finished with the Biko syndicate yet. Do you think Minna made the right choice by letting Jaewon live to face the Ashima, or should she have ended it herself? The debt is paid, but a new war is rising. Subscribe now to see how the Cold Queen handles the first strike of the Ashima War. Drop a dragon in the comments if you stayed until the very end. Minna started the night as a wife trapped by her past. She ended it as a woman who holds the future of the Biko syndicate in her hands. The debt is paid, but the war with the Ashima has just begun. Now, I have a question for you. If you were Minna, could you have walked away from the only person who ever truly saw you, even if that person was a monster? Or do you think Jaewon deserved a second chance? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I read every single one, and I want to know who you're rooting for in this new dynasty. If you loved this story of loyalty and betrayal, make sure to hit that subscribe button, and if you haven't seen our 88-minute saga about the Eyes of the Dragon, click the video on your screen right now. You won't believe the twist in that one. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.